former world champion of PFL, fought in the UFC, very successful broadcaster, and hobbyist.
Author.
Yeah.
Hobbyist author is actually a good way. I know it's a good way.
I try to separate those two things.
It's a good way to describe that.
Yeah. And hobbyist jiu-jitsu person.
Yes.
Even that's a stretch.
But you're very successful in a lot of the different aspects you've done. You're somebody I admire. I appreciate you be willing to do the podcast with me. But maybe you can give a fast version of why you think it's okay to waste an hour with me.
No, it's not a waste ever to have good conversations with good people. You and I have been friends for a long time, obviously. I'm really interested to learn more about the financial side of things because you have a lot more knowledge in that world than I probably ever will. And it's cool to come up here and hang out and just be with your friends. I do have a daily radio show, so it's like my day job to do radio. And the podcasting space allows for just a lot more freedom, flexibility, and I think ability to kind of like be yourself. And my job is to talk sports. Talking sports is great, love it, but it's one sliver of my interests. And I anticipate and demand that we will explore the full pizza pie of those interests through the course of the podcast.
We'll be here a long time.
That's right. That's exactly what I love. And so you mentioned something right there. It's just a chance to hang out with friends. I look at it this way, whether or not this turns into anything bigger, I get to capture, hours and hours of people that I like, that I get to spend time with, that now I get to keep forever. So that's my biggest goal, is I get to personally take something. Obviously, I'd love it if there's great things that other people can learn. That's my big passion. The nonprofit I have was established for that, the idea of like sharing knowledge and success and learning from each other. So that's mine. But Kenny Florian, special guest here. As a bit of background for anybody who may not know him, and if you're watching this, you definitely do know who he is. But man to fight in 4 different weight classes, fought in the Ultimate Fighter, known for your cerebral strategies, your tactics. You fought for the belt 3 different times. Then we're one of the very few people that were able to successfully make that transition from fighter into a both broadcaster and personality, and turn it into a way to create income and stability for yourself and your family. So somebody I've admired as a fighter my whole career, but getting to know you more, just so impressed with you. Kenny, thanks for joining the show.
Yeah, of course, man. Thanks for having me. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, from your standpoint, when we get talking today, before we jump in here, I'd love to get your thoughts. First of all, you both achieved the highest levels of success in one of the most difficult things to do in my mind, mixed martial arts, fought at the biggest promotions, won world champions, fought for world championships. What do you think it was that made you able to do that when so many other people have those same pursuits and weren't able to do that?
Gosh, I think there's a lot to that, some that's within your control and some that's not. And I think that for me, I have a big passion for martial arts. I love doing it. I love learning. I love getting better. And also getting beat up is no fun. So getting beat up is no fun. So I wanted to try to not get beat up as much and do better. I saw it as a path to, make some money, of course, and but more than anything else, I really had a passion for martial arts and wanting to get better at it. And it was something that I spent a lot of time kind of analyzing and looking at my training and trying to find as much information as I could from other people. So it's definitely not a singular effort. It's not just you out there in a lot of ways. Like, yeah, it is on fight night, but there's certainly a team behind you of a bunch of people that, whether it's your sparring partners, coaches, other fights that I watched and try to learn from, all the travels that I had prior, going to Brazil, competing in jiu-jitsu tournaments, making a lot of mistakes along the way and doing my best to kind of learn from mistakes and improving.
I love that. And we're going to come back to the mistakes portion because I think that's a big part of it. But Sean, I want to ask you that same question. You know, there's a lot of people who were born with a lot more talent than you. And, and in spite of that, you achieved PFL World Championship. You fought in the UFC for a number of years. We're known as one of the most exciting fighters to ever go into the octagon. People tune in, your entrances, not so much your entrances, the weigh-ins. Yeah. Kenny was the entrances. You're the weigh-in champ. But, you know, thinking about that, what do you think made you so successful when other people who work or wanted it just as bad didn't get it?
Well, I think a lot of luck in my case. Having certain opportunities at certain times helped me a lot. I was not, my imposter syndrome, I think, persisted throughout the course of my career, mostly because I was not a cerebral martial artist. I still am not. Right? Like, there are guys, high-level guys, and I've been lucky enough to work with Kenny, obviously, and Randy Couture and Dan Hardy and some of these individuals who are like real students of the game. And for me, fighting was always just about fighting. It was about the ability to compete. And the training is a necessary evil. And I took it seriously and obviously tried to improve and make myself better at it. But the the goal was always just to fight and hopefully to win, obviously. It was not really anything that I took seriously in terms of, well, someday I'm going to, win $1 million doing this, or someday I'm going to have a gold belt on national television doing this. It was all just like, I want to go win my next fight. I want to go beat up the next guy. I want to, in the first year of fighting, I fought 7 times in 7 months without really training, I had friends that we would get together. We would grapple at Sugar House Park in Salt Lake City. We would, my buddy would bring a heavy bag on one of those stands in the pickup truck, and he would set it on the grass, and we would grapple, and then we would run up the hill, and then I'd come back down, and I'd hit the heavy bag, and it was just like this. Like, people probably thought we were crazy. The cops showed up one time. We're just like, what are you guys doing? Are you fighting each other? We're like, no, we're just like getting ready for I've got to fight, this weekend or whatever. And I never really graduated beyond that mentality of I just wanted to get ready for the next fight. And I think that that's what helped me be successful at some levels. I think it hurt me in the UFC a little. I think that in the PFL, I had some success and beat some guys that they were worried too much about the $1 million. They were worried too much about their reputation in the game. They were worried. I don't know. You'd have to interview them. Maybe we'll get a chance to. But I don't think I ever really grew out of, I just want to go beat up the next guy. And that mentality ended up serving me and my fight style, at least to have a redemptive run with the PFL and then get out while I was ahead.
Sean is insanely durable.
There's also that.
That's kind of a God-given gift, in my opinion, is like his ability to be durable, to take punishment and keep coming forward. And, obviously that also comes with toughness, resiliency,
Exactly. It's still form of toughness.
Yeah.
I think there's durability
which is good for anything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Durability physically, which some of that you're just born with. But I also think the durability mentally, because Sean talked about this before, but I think a lot of the people, they can be in a bad fight and still in any moment think that they can win. I can say personally for me, I got to fight at a lower level, but I can say that mental game you have to play where you get behind or things get hard, and there's a lot of opportunities to quit. There's a lot of that, and I think that's the difference of something that you were successful at, is you didn't let a bad moment in a fight or a bad interaction in a fight make you think that I can't win this fight. It kind of gets to what you're talking about, like the mindset. Kenny, this is something you talk about a lot, is the mindset. When you were talking about it's just a fight, clear-headed, other people are thinking too much. Kenny, can you explain a bit about that? Because you've talked about this before on a lot of different venues.
Yeah. Well, I think it's important to kind of know yourself. So I think if I took Sean's approach of like taking 7 fights in 7 months, like I'd be dead, so I had to manage how I trained and I trained extremely hard. But I had to build myself up into that, like all the way from the years of jiu-jitsu prior. It's like I trained a lot, but I like slowly built up to it because my body, went from, I couldn't move my arms on Saturdays after a week of training jiu-jitsu, or things like that. Like my body would just get beat up pretty easily. So I had to build my way up to it. So I understood, okay, I'm not the most durable person. I have to be smart in my approach of how I do this. So I had to take a little bit of a different approach to it. So as far as mindset, like I always thought like, okay, the sport is still new. What are people leaving off the table? Like what things can I do that other people aren't doing, either from a strategic standpoint or from a training standpoint, that's going to set me apart from others. And the other thing, I guess to go back to training and training volume in a lot of ways, I picked up the sport late. So
How old were you?
I started jiu-jitsu, I think 19, 20 years old, I think 20 years old. And I think I had my first fight in 2003. And then I was in the UFC in like 2004. So,
Wow.
I was kind of thrown into the fire really quickly. So I understood that, time was going to be my biggest opponent more than anything else. So I played soccer before, and I think I was pretty talented at soccer and maybe didn't work as hard as I should have. And I saw guys that I was ahead of at one point surpass me. And I remember when I started doing jiu-jitsu and I, kind of started getting more serious about it, I realized I wasn't going to let that happen. Like again, that I realized I had to be training harder than everybody else because I picked it up a little bit later in life. And I just didn't want to make that same mistake. So for me, I was like, I need to be training all the time. I didn't take time off from training, and I tried to like maximize my training and be as efficient as possible with it.
I love that. So one of the things I'm hearing just as we're talking is, Sean, whether it's the punching bag in the back of the pickup truck, and the boxing thing, or you're saying, hey, I'm going to be mindful with my training, is that you put in all the hours and you did the work. The other thing is it seems like you were both intentional with it. Is that fair to say? Did you know that you wanted to keep fighting, or was it just, hey, I'm just going to do one fight at a time? What was your approach with it?
It was living in a moment and saying, all right, I'm going to go. I had an unsatisfying college football experience. I would actually be really curious to know how the first generation and maybe second generation MMA athletes, how many of them were fueled by failure in another sport or their own.
Yeah.
And failure, maybe not even the right word, but their own like missed opportunities in another sport,
Yes.
being cut from a team and acknowledging your own mistake in that, and then being like, all right, I'm going to go rectify this in a new sport. That certainly fueled me pretty significantly, but I never thought beyond the next fight. And I know that there are guys now who are just like, they go to the gym for the first time when they're 12. They decide they're going to be a UFC champion when they're 12, and then they achieve that when they're in their 20s or, they hit the 30 years old. And for me, it was always like, all right, I'm going to try this. I was a fan of sport watching guys like Kenny and Forrest Griffin. He knows this. I've told Forrest before. Like, I saw so much of myself in Forrest Griffin when he became what he was on The Ultimate Fighter, that first season of The Ultimate Fighter. And as I learned more about him, I was like, oh, wow, we were the same. He was a guy, he was like a walk-on football player at the University of Georgia who realized, man, this might not be it for me. Anyway, it's not a Forrest Griffin tribute show, but I saw some of that. I saw some of him excelling, and I was just like, well, I'm that kind of dude. I'm the kind of guy that can just push harder than other people can push and probably laugh at myself when I screw things up. So I'm going to try this sport. And I had some success in the first fight and the second fight and the third fight, hit a roadblock in the third fight. And that's the end for a lot of people because it's so embarrassing to lose a fight. It's humiliating and it's kind of terrifying.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh, you know what? I'm fine. And I took a fight a month later and I won that one. So it was always about the next fight for me all the way up until the end when I realized, man, I don't know if it's smart for me to take one more fight. And so I didn't.
Yeah. Well, plus going out on top with $1 million, I don't
That's nice.
think you
It's a
can
good way to
write a
go
better
out.
story
That's a
than
big
that.
reason why it was. That's a big reason why it wouldn't be smart for me to take one more fight, because I was always a very high risk fighter, right? Like I was never, from a skill standpoint, better than most opponents. I was never strategically better than any of my opponents. I didn't execute things in training more successfully in the actual fight than my opponents did. So it was always very much like a coin flip. And if I was gonna, you have some success, I won $1 million tournament. The next fight is going to be the toughest fight. They're going to find, all right, well, you're the champ, so now we got to give you someone who's a monster. And it was like, man, I've taken a lot of damage. I had a child on the way. Nobody in MMA gets to go out on top. Nobody. And so I was like, let me be the exception rather than the rule. I'm going to go out while it's my top.
Yeah, I love that. So it's funny because what you just said is true. Most people don't get to go out on top, and whether they're addicted to the success, the winning, the lifestyle, the notoriety, or just that feeling when you get in that cage, or just liking to compete. A lot of people stay too late, and they either stay until they're forced out or their body forces them out. A lot of cases, and you are an exception here. Kenny, you're a person who fought literally just like the murderer's row of like the special people at, I can't think, like strength of schedule. Like it's amazing. All the people you competed with and competed well with. But when you hung up the gloves, what was the reason that you hung up the gloves? And we're going to talk about, what happens afterwards. Because for me, that's what I'm passionate about.
Yeah.
And we're going to get there. But first of all, tell me, for you, when you saw that every single fight was, number one in the world or champion or always top 5. For you, that puts a lot of miles on your body. Tell me what got you to go out and how'd you go out?
Yeah, it was a few factors. First, I remember kind of made a personal deal with myself that I would stop competing if I realized that physically I wasn't able to train the way I wanted to. I realized that was kind of an edge that I had. And if I wasn't able to train the way I wanted, then I'd be putting myself at risk in a fight. And so there was that aspect. Physically, my back was really, really bad. And it came to a point where I was like, I don't know if I can keep doing this at a high level. And the only way I wanted to do it was at a high level. And I had an opportunity to do broadcasting full time. So I was lucky enough to be given that opportunity. So I had that going for me. And yeah, it was kind of like one door was closing, another door was opening, and kind of had that ability to make that choice because I had options.
Well, I think it's cool because both of you have said lucky, and I disagree with luck. I believe, absolutely, there's natural luck and its cousin risk, right? And good things happen to you that you have no control over, bad things happen to you that you have no control of. But I think luck is generally opportunity that's presented to you that you seize. We all get opportunity, and most of us don't recognize it. You recognized, hey, my body's not feeling great. I'm getting hard fights if I can't compete at the highest level. And then you recognize there's this other avenue for it. I think it's something that, for me, I get passionate about because a lot of people don't have that other avenue or don't recognize that other avenue or don't take advantage of all the contacts and people that they've met over the years. You two are both people who've done that, been able to transition into broadcasting, into media, into making this into a career. But, if you were to take a step back, if you didn't have that, how well set up did fighting make you for everything else financially to take care of yourselves for the rest of your life? Like, what kind of help do you guys get in that aspect, or do most fighters get when it comes to finances, support, education? How did you know to do that?
Well, for me, my parents were the best example, the only example I had when it came to anything financial. And my dad was the oldest of 6 kids, raised by a Catholic school teacher in Dubuque, Iowa. My mom, her father ran his own drywall company. So, different kinds of middle class, but both very middle class upbringings for my parents. And they taught me the value of a dollar from the time I was very, very young. They made me earn things from the time I was very, very young. And they instilled in me a sense of responsibility with my finances that honestly is probably like I over-indexed on sometimes. I'm a notorious cheapskate. I'm a guy who would rather save for a rainy day than, you know, spend the money that you've earned, however. And so when fighting started to bring in some like an alternative source of income, I was like, oh, cool. I'm going to make sure I deploy this in a way that I think makes sense. Invested in some real estate as soon as I got a couple of bonuses in the UFC and things like that. But even before then, I was saving that money and only using that money to provide the luxurious experiences, right? If I wanted to go, I love safari. If I wanted to take a trip to Africa, you better take a fight and win the money to pay for that instead of going into my sort of day job funds. And the other thing, and I can't decide still if this is a regret for me or not, but I never, while I was fighting, I never went all in on that crazy high risk career and stopped doing other things. I was always pursuing another job. I was always pursuing broadcasting.
Yeah.
In the course of my high level fights, I was doing a radio show the whole time. And then when I was in the PFL, I had 2 other jobs the whole time. And I went back to school. So at one point I was with 4 jobs, whatever. And it's just because I, correctly or not, I always thought you have to be prepared for whatever happens. And you have to do as much as is within your capacity to prepare for those things. And so I always did it. And I still do. But fighting certainly blessed me in a financial way that I never anticipated getting into it. And I just tried to make the most of it.
Yeah, so it was, for you, it was extra. And then, Kenny, I'm going to send the same question to you with a little bit more is that, you know, for fighters, it's really inconsistent pay too.
Yeah.
And
It's volatile.
very volatile. And then you might get some big paydays. And if you get fight of the night, like if you're an exciting fighter, if you're great like you guys, you can get these big paydays. But then it's very inconsistent, and you may go, you know, you may get 2 or 3 fights in a year. You may only get 1. If you get injured, you may get none. So how did you make that transition intelligently from saying, I get sometimes nice paydays or all my money at once, and how do I make that last? And then secondly is, you know, once you're done fighting, what do you do next?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. It's kind of cool in that, you know, your performances directly dictate how much money you get. You know, for a lot of fighters, it's like you get a certain amount to fight and you get another certain amount. So for a lot of fighters, you know, your performances directly dictate, you know, how much money you get. So for a lot of fighters, you show up, you get a certain amount, and then if you win, you get a certain amount. If you lose, you do not get that. So there are no guarantees in the sport. So knowing that, you make as much as you can, and whatever you make, you say, well, my next fight may or may not be a win, so let me put some aside or invest it.
Do you think everyone does that?
Probably not. You know, I did not live in Vegas. I lived in Boston. I trained in Boston. I trained in Montreal. I trained in New York City. And I would just kind of like train constantly. I did not have time, nor was I that excited to kind of go out and party and stuff. I would go out after a fight and then go home, get right back to training. Again, I knew that my advantage would be to try to train more than people or learn more than people. So I felt like I constantly had to do that. So whatever money I had, I'd put it away, or I would invest it in real estate, you know, just like Sean. So I came from a family, you know, my dad was a physician. He was a thoracic and cardiovascular surgeon. Encouraged my oldest brother to not be a doctor, to go into business. So I had a family of a bunch of people that were either entrepreneurs or in the real estate game or, you know, doing different business stuff. And, you know, saw what they were doing, got some, you know, basic advice, looked for properties that I thought had some value, either for myself to purchase or to rent out. And yeah, as soon as I could start to kind of buy real estate, I would do that, and it ended up being profitable. You know, Boston's a very busy city with a lot of people looking for places to live, and I was able to make money doing that, and start to accrue some assets. And you know, I invested in real estate for a very long time, and eventually, you know, built you know, a business where I would start to put things in for retirement and put things away for later, and that was kind of a big benefit. You know, for me, it didn't make sense because I was like, wait, I have all this money that I could spend and use right now, and I just kind of kept getting the same messages, like, put it away for retirement. I was like, I'm never going to see that money again.
Who was
like,
giving you those
you
messages?
Will later.
They were right, first of all.
Yeah,
but who was giving you those messages?
My parents, my brothers, my sister, like, these are things that you should be putting away. And I did. And the other thing is, just like Sean, I invested in myself. So not financially, but I invested in myself in looking for opportunities. Every Wednesday morning, I would get up at about 3:30 in the morning, and I would put my suit on. 3:30 in the morning, I had to get to ESPN.
Jeez, that's bedtime.
Yeah.
I know, literally. And I'm not a great sleeper, as a lot of people know. And I'd be training, Tuesday night, probably go to sleep way too late, wake up 3:30 in the morning, take a shower, get something in my belly, and make a 2.5-hour drive over to Connecticut to work a show called MMA Live on ESPN. And we got there early. There was a production meeting. So there was this whole thing. And then I would drive back home, literally almost falling asleep at the wheel, and hope that I can take a nap when I get home and then train on Wednesday night. So that kind of set the path for me to be, hey, Kenny's kind of doing analysis on ESPN. This could set me up as a guy that can do broadcasting in the future. And, I think for a lot of people, it would have worn a lot of people down, maybe, especially with a full training schedule. But that set me up to have other opportunities besides that. That led to, broadcasting for the UFC, being an analyst for the UFC, doing broadcasting for the PFL, doing broadcasting for a show called BattleBots. And, so all these little things, these opportunities came my way because of that investment that I put into it early on,
Yeah, being conscious, intentional. I think that's important. I mean, Sean, you did the same thing. You made it into broadcasting. Obviously, you had the show that you'd done before, but how did you make that transition? And give advice to, let's say, people who are maybe only thinking about their next fight right now.
Well, you got to think beyond the next fight, right? Your life is bigger than whatever your job is, right? Whatever your hobby is, your life is bigger than that. So you got to think beyond. And it's one of the benefits of being young and at that time single, where you just got to think about the next fight and whatnot. As far as how I got into the television broadcasting part of it, my success in local fights led me to a part-time radio show on a local radio station that was centered on combat sports. You remember the old cage radio with the guy Johnny Ritchie. Shout out Johnny. And I realized, okay, this is something I'm pretty decent at. I can think on my feet. We can be funny. We can also analyze what we're seeing. And at that time in the UFC, pride fighting was still a thing for a little bit of when the cage radio existed. We would talk about boxing and things like that. And I was like, okay, I could do this. And sports have always been my passion. So the notoriety I got from being a successful fighter locally got me a full-time radio job, not just on the MMA side or the combat sports side, but on like full-time sports talk radio. And then I was doing that daily and cutting my teeth there and getting better at that. When I was in the UFC, I was like, okay, I know that from a broadcasting standpoint, I'm good enough to be an analyst for this sport that I'm also a fighter in. But the ingredient that was missing in the UFC was I was not successful enough as a fighter in the UFC. It made sense to have Kenny Florian, who had competed for titles and been part of the Ultimate Fighter and was kind of a foundational piece of that new era of MMA in the UFC. It made sense for them to have him be an analyst. It didn't make sense for them to have...
Plus, he looked like an analyst, and that really helps.
Yeah. It didn't make sense for them, because I begged for those opportunities while I was in the UFC. It didn't make sense for them to have the funny weigh-in guy who loses more than he wins be an analyst. And that was a painful thing for me to have to acknowledge when I'm like, I remember Joe Silva was the matchmaker for the UFC, and he was trying to do me a favor and trying to extend my contract as he was retiring, as he was getting out of the game. And I was like, Joe, I don't even care about you giving me more fights. I want you to give me broadcasting opportunities. And he was like, then win your fights.
Oh.
And I was like, dang. And I turned down the contract extension because my plan was my next opponent was a top 10 guy. My plan was I'm going to beat that top 10 guy, and then I'll be able to say, now I belong in the top 15, and now you need to let me do this as well. It didn't go that way. I get to the PFL, and the same thing. I was like, I'm already a sports broadcaster. You should make me a sports broadcaster for you also. And they were like, no, come on. Focus on the fighting. I said, no, listen. The only way that I'm ever going to be able to break into this is if I do something special. I will win the fights. I said, you know what? I'll fight the same night that I do the show. That you have me broadcast the prelims, and then I'll fight on the main card. And this is a fledgling company. This is a startup that wants anything that will make people pay attention. And they kind of looked at each other and just like, nah, that's irresponsible. We can't. I said, don't worry about it. I promise you I'll be fine. I don't even start warming up until 30 minutes before the fight anyway. So I said,
this is very true. I've been in the back room with you.
It's very true. I was like, because part of my game day, my fight day ritual was don't let the thing exhaust you all day long. Right. Distract yourself, watch movies, hang out with your friends until it's time to go, and then get serious about it. So I explained that to them, and I was like, let me try it one time. And so they agreed, and thankfully, I did a decent job on the broadcast. I went back. They had an hour between my final fight that I called and when I was going to be walking to the cage. And so I went back. I changed my clothes. I got warm. I went out. I won the fight. And that was enough for them to realize, all right, if he's a dumb enough person to want to do this, we will let him do it. And Bas Rutten was on the broadcast. He said, don't do this. Randy Couture was on the broadcast. He said, no, you have to stay focused on the fight. And respectfully to both of them, I even said this at the time, I said, you guys can say that because you're legends already, and you're already in that chair.
You had to take that risk.
I said, if I want to be able to be in that chair next to you, I have to do something unique. I have to do something different, and this is it. And they were like, all right, man. It worked.
It did work. It was fantastic. And we spent time talking about fighting, and unfortunately, you have a plane you need to jump on. So we're going to have to cut this a little shorter. But I wanted to call out a couple things. Is you mentioned here that you asked for it. You know, you're like, hey, I want to do this. And you put yourself in front of those opportunities, like waking up at 3:30 and saying, I'm going to do this. And this happened. This gave me a connection to that. We talked about this last night, that you can't get anything if you don't ask for it. I think the biggest thing is you have to know what you want. And then you have to put yourself out there and ask for it, because none of that could have happened for either one of you if you didn't. I think it's the same thing when it comes to finances, which is what we'll talk hopefully in another podcast later. But for me, I always say same thing. If you don't know your goal, if you don't know what you're trying to do, you can't get there. Like the step one is establish a goal.
Yeah. I mean, I think Sean's certainly more tenacious than I am, I think. And that's definitely been a part of why he's successful at what he does, both in fighting and outside of fighting. But I also think, and I know he did the exact same thing. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been tenacious towards the goal. But sounds cliche and a little cheesy, but envisioning that thing and actually, like, you know, people talk about this all the time, and people who don't believe it, I don't think they're going to be successful in that way. But you have to envision even something that may not exist at the time and be like, hey, what if, you know, you kind of have to be a little bit of a dreamer and be like, hey, maybe I can do this one day, and start putting that out there, you know, either verbally or spiritually, mentally, whatever it is. And you know what? A lot of times those opportunities get presented to you.
It's really wild that mindset can be such a difference maker.
Yeah.
There's a million examples of it in sports, in our sport especially. I mean, Conor McGregor, I believe, he spoke a lot of his success into existence, and his unfailing self-belief. No matter what you think of him now, that he's been so
impressive as hell. Yeah.
Like he made that happen. He manifested that destiny with the way that he talked publicly, but he also talked to himself that way, right? And look, you've been a very successful guy financially, and it's not because you came from a silver spoon upbringing. It's actually pretty unrealistic, right, for people to think, I'm going to bootstrap my way into being a millionaire. You have to be willing to believe that unrealistic thing.
Yeah.
I believe I'm going to write a bestseller someday. I believe I'm going to write an Oscar-winning Hollywood script someday. I believe I'm going to marry the most beautiful girl in my neighborhood, or the most beautiful man in my neighborhood, if that's what you're into. Like, you have to kind of be willing to be unrealistic,
right?
To be a little bit silly.
Absolutely.
Yeah, this thing, this strange dichotomy where you can be both completely delusional on what you can achieve, but completely realistic on where you're at right now.
Yeah.
And that's where the goal planning comes up. Like, and when you say, you have to have this crazy goal and you have to envision it. No, that's really true. In financial planning, literally step one is establish the goal, because until you know where your destination is, you can't map out the things and create a probability of success.
Absolutely.
Do this in financial planning as a wealth strategist. It's completely true. Is step one, you set up a goal. In closing, but where I want to pick up next time is that I agree on us personally. Ultimately, we're responsible for our own success, and we're responsible for our own failures. You have to decide what you can control, what you can't control. But I also think when you get in a position where you have flexibility, where you've had opportunity, you're in positions that most people don't get to be in, which you're both in positions. But I also think as an organization, these large companies, is that I believe when you have success, you should be stewards of that success and help other people with it. And it's one of my biggest frustrations is that most athletes, not just related to mixed martial arts or the UFC or PFL, whatever it is, but most athletes, they leave their career not knowing what to do next and not having a roadmap where to go next.
Yeah.
And oftentimes not a lot of help how to get there. Unless they've had a good contact or have the right mindset, it doesn't really help them out. I wanted to ask you this. Why do you think it is that these organizations don't give you retirement plans and financial education to fighters? I know so many personally, and Sean, you and I know some people at the gym personally who fought in the UFC, had success, and don't have anything to show for it when it's all done, except for a hurt back and some arthritis and forgetting some things.
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know exactly why. I'm just speculating here, but I would think that, building that infrastructure is probably a little complicated, maybe from a legal perspective. I don't know. Maybe not. And I don't know. And if we want to get conspiratorial, perhaps, I think that if you do set up a good retirement plan and if you are saving, then maybe you don't have to fight as much. If you're a big star and I want that star to continue fighing, maybe
So
I don't want
keep
them to be
hungry?
successful. Maybe I don't want them to be so successful. And, there's been certain promoters that have actually talked about that. Maybe that hunger goes away when hey, I got $10 million in the bank. I don't need to do this anymore. How does that affect the way that you train? How does that affect the way that you fight? How long does that extend your career, or how much does that shorten it? So I think that's where I think that there's some complications there that may go against what you are as a business. But I think they should do that. Whether it's, giving you shares of the company or something like that, or giving you certain benefits for retirement of taking that percentage. You know what? We're not going to give this to you in your paycheck. We're going to put this away for your retirement if you decide to be a part of this plan that we set up.
Exactly, because even contracted employees, I'm going to come to you, but even contracted employees, you could set up a non-qualified deferred retirement for people and put it in there. It's a tax benefit when it's accepted later. I think there's a bunch of benefits for it, but it also, there's vesting. There's 100 ways that you could make this successful for the business. I just wish people would do it, because I hate watching people who literally give their lives and their livelihood away over a 5 to 10 year career and then have to live with that for the rest of their life and figure out what to do next. Sean, you were going to say something.
Well, I think that you just talked about this. You have to ask for it.
Yeah.
I don't think most fighters are in that space, especially at the beginning of the career, the beginning of you get the call from the UFC, from the PFL, from one championship. You make it to a big show, and most people are not like, all right, now how else are you going to help me? Mm-hmm. Most people are groveling, grateful to be in that situation. It's part of the culture of MMA that we have to fix. So I don't think a lot of people know how to ask for it, or even know to ask for it, in order to get that thing for themselves. And then when they do, there's no collective bargaining. There's no system set up to protect the rights of fighters in situations like that. And from the business perspective, from the promoter's perspective, I mean, you can make an easy case. Well, why would we want to spend time, money, effort, energy on this when the average career lasts 2 fights with us? I'm going to spend all this time doing, trying to get you set up with this thing, and then we're going to fire you 2 months from now anyway. And the NFL has these things, the NBA has these things, Major League Baseball and hockey
But they have
these
collective
things.
bargaining.
That's because of collective bargaining, and also, even with those things in place for those leagues, the number of people that use them successfully is embarrassingly small.
Oh yeah, I know former NBA players. Former NFL players. Yeah, we see it.
I mean, it's the tragedy, the great tragedy of American sport, where you watch somebody who made this insane amount of money, or even just like a good, modest, like, hey, I made a couple $1,000,000 that should be in my 20s. That should be a beautiful head start on life that can really set you up if you handle it right for a very long time. And you see those guys squander those things. That's after they attend the rookie symposium and after they hear the older player who went through the same thing telling their horror story about spending all their money and paying for this cousin and that friend.
That's
to
it,
have all
yeah.
this stuff. And so if you're
Yeah.
if you're Dana White in the UFC, right? Because they're the biggest boys on the block. They're friends with those
Yes.
guys, and they're going, our program doesn't even work, and we spend a lot of money on it. We have to do it because the union lawyers make us do it, but it doesn't even work. So if you're the UFC, you're going, well, they offer it, nobody uses it anyway, and it's just a bunch of money that they have to throw down the toilet. I'm not doing that.
Yeah. See, but that's where I disagree. You don't even have to throw the money in the toilet. Like from a structure standpoint, if we go down the rabbit hole, you can make it that you have to be with the company either a certain length of time or do a certain number of fights. You can put all that into the what we call the eligibility requirements.
Sure.
So you can build that in so it doesn't make it, oh, well, we gave them money and then they're gone 2 fights later. But I think it would, one, it's just brings a little bit of awareness. But you're right. It is ultimately the individual's responsibility, but there should be some things structurally that are in place. I care way too much about it.
Yeah, and one more thing. I think, what Sean alluded to is having the right people around you, because a lot of people, they have a little bit of success and they're like, oh, let me take care of everybody because this money's going to continually come in. It's like, you can get injured tomorrow and it can all go away. And, you get all these people that start telling you, hey, give me some money for this, or can I borrow money for this? Or, hey, let's open up a restaurant chain. And it's like, how many of those restaurant chains go under because, they're not really planned very well. So I think having the right people around you, having the right mentors, having the right advice, I think is huge too. Like if you're a professional athlete, because just because you have money doesn't mean it's going to be there tomorrow.
Yeah, I agree with you so much. I got great advice the other way because I don't know if I've actually told you this, but Jeremy Horn, when I was thinking, oh, you know what? And this is me, I was making good money with my regular job. I always said it was a hobby that happens to pay money. But I get addicted to it just like anyone else. Like fighting's fun and getting notoriety is fun. And this idea of fighting in the UFC for me was like really exciting. It plays to all my ego. And I was getting at that place. I was fighting in Bellator at that time. And I asked Jeremy Horn, hey, what do you think about me like joining the UFC and trying that route? And Jeremy goes, well, Dave, I think you could do okay there. And by okay, he means I could be a pretty good gatekeeper. I couldn't do that great. So he's letting me down gently, but he goes, but even if you're great, unless you're Conor McGregor or, that big name, you're not going to make the kind of money you make right now. And then you have 5 to 7 years to make all your money, even if you're decent. And then you have to deal with all the repercussions. And it was really good for me because I had the right people around me. I had somebody like Jeremy Horn who's been there and done all that and told me what I should do. But in closing, how do you find the right people? So we'll ask that as your question. Where do you find your right people, and are your right people you have access to?
I think looking at success, whatever that may mean for you, I think many people would define that differently, but looking for people who have a vast amount of knowledge, that have some amount of financial success, that are well-rounded in that approach as well, I think that kind of helps take away any potential luck they may have had in their life, So are they planners? Are they professionals in kind of everything that they do? That's what I'm going to look for. Who are these people? Are these people that are going to build you up or are going to, kind of tear you down? Positive people who have proven track records of success, and also those people that are willing to help.
All of that, and then people that are willing to offer their help, their advice, their time, their whatever, whether you're winning or not.
Love that.
Yeah.
Because the people that were in your corner before you became a rich person, before
Yes.
you became a professional athlete, the people, your family, your friends from childhood, the people that love you unconditionally, regardless of whether you're a champion or you're on a 4-fight losing streak, whatever that looks like in your field, right? Those people.
Yep.
Because there's too many, and we're all guilty of it, right? You want to be associated with success, and you want to meet the guy or the gal who's having like their run toward fame and things like that. Doesn't mean you care about them. The people that care about you care about you and not your bank account, your car, your career, anything else.
Yeah.
Those are the people.
So a lot of sharks out there as well. So
Yeah.
I think that's really good advice. Yeah.
Ton of sharks. And I'm just going to close it out by saying first, thank you guys both for giving me some time here. And if anybody happens to be listening to this, this is an experiment for me to try and get better on my own. And as you can see, it's not going to be perfect. Mics are going to move. Things are going to change. But the important thing is to go out there and try to get better, do something more, get out of your comfort zone, go suck at something, because that's how you're going to learn. And to their point, what they just said is find your mentors or those people who are going to help you and support you. And if you don't know those people, guys, there's so many resources and access for you, whether that's online or different books. I'll drop some in the comments on things that really made an impact on me. Last thing I'll ask you is there anything you'd recommend somebody read or somebody listen to that could help them if they don't have that person in their life right now?
Man's Search for Meaning. Viktor Frankl. Go read it.
Gosh. I don't know. I mean, I was always inspired by some of the Bruce Lee books because I think it not only is it an important approach to martial arts, I think, of kind of how much of a visionary he was, but he tied a lot of philosophical principles to training. And I always saw martial arts as a way of improving your life. So no matter what, I think anyone can improve their life. So, the Tao of Jeet Kune Do by Bruce Lee, I think whether you do martial arts or fighting or not, I think is really interesting because it definitely has a lot of ties and parallels to life.
I love that. And I'll plug Tony Robbins. If you guys don't have it, go listen to it. I mean, Kenny, you and I talked about this, but, Unleash the Power Within, Awaken the Giant Within, any of those things, you can go read it. You can probably find it online free. And if you don't have a mentor, create your own mentor. So we'll close it out there, guys. Thank you so much.